Luke, what's going on, man?
Not much. Thank you so much for having me.
I see you got some cards here.
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff I want to talk to you today about.
I have a lot of stuff I need to learn, so that's great.
Perfect. So 2 categories I want to talk to you about primarily today. One is the manufacturing and logistics side of trading cards, and then secondly, trading card game design. But before we dive into that, maybe it'd be fun to take a look at a few products here, because these are going to be very similar to the products that we're making together. So first we got the booster box, of course, the classic. So this is our kind of medium standard size booster box. We'll have somewhere around 8 foil packs inside, somewhere around 8 cards per pack, roughly 64 cards. So it's got the classic top bottom box. We use kind of a higher quality 60 caliber cardboard box.
So the booster box is a bunch of these little packs.
Exactly.
That have totally random cards inside of it, right?
Correct.
So you don't know what cards are going to be inside of here.
Exactly. And we'll talk a little bit more about randomness later, because there's a limit to the pure randomness that you actually want to do in a trading card game. But yes, in theory, all the cards will be unique. You might get some duplicates, that's part of the game.
And sometimes if you're building a deck, you would want duplicates. If you have a card that you love to play, you'll pull it more often. So this is the booster pack, and you get 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8 packs inside of it. How many cards are in a pack?
8. So you got 64 in the box.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
And depending on the number of unique cards in the run itself and how you want to structure the booster packs, you can kind of control how many cards you want to put in a pack. But we try and keep like a reasonable distribution between the number of booster packs and the number of cards in each pack. So we've got the booster packs, 8 packs in a box, 8 cards per pack, 64 cards in a box.
64.
Yeah, that's the typical standard. It might be a little higher or lower for our particular project depending on how we want to structure the pack, but that's kind of the baseline that we're working for.
And then we got the starter. So the name makes me think that this is something that you would get and you can just plain old start.
Exactly. So it'll have 2 starter decks in here, and this will have everything that you need to actually play the game. This will be non-randomized as well, so every one of these that you buy will be the exact same. And if you just want to buy the game and play the game by itself, this will have everything that you need.
Okay.
Open this up just so we can see what
You're
it
good
looks
at that.
like.
You've done this before, huh?
Open a few of these, yeah.
We need a tutorial just on that right there. How to open your starter box like a pro.
There we go. So we got the same top bottom kind of slow open box here, and I'm a little obsessed with using this spot UV finish on packaging, so I'm gonna see
Oh yeah, that looks cool.
talk you into doing that somewhere on our packaging just because I think it looks awesome.
It's like glossy versus matte.
Exactly. And then inside here we have the deck box, which is very cool. We're gonna design a custom deck box completely customized for your style. This has like a faux leather exterior. We can do any kind of printing on the outside of here. Once again, a little spot UV because I'm obsessed. And then a kind of suede interior as well. We can also do full printing on the inside of this. And then inside of here, this particular product, we did a pack of sleeves and 1 starter deck. But with yours, I think we're planning on doing 2 starter decks that you can play head to head right out of the box.
That's awesome. This is so cool.
Yeah, really awesome. We can do a custom size on that as well. Now I've talked myself up on opening these and I can't open this one. Talk boxes are a little harder.
Oh, Mr. Opener thought he had all the moves and now he's struggling. You need a knife?
I'm not gonna lie.
I'll get you a knife.
I don't want to crush the box. This is how the real pros do it anyways. You don't want to risk scratching your cards.
I'll give you the nastiest, rustiest X-Acto ever, sorry.
Then we have the tuck box. This is something you're very familiar with. Cards inside a tuck box. And we'll do a custom design on this as well. And this will be your starter deck. So this is a non-randomized starter deck. Everybody who buys a starter deck will get the same cards, and it'll set you up with everything you need to play.
And then the starter box comes with a booster pack, right?
Yes, so that is the one randomized component of the starter deck itself. We'll also likely include 1 or maybe even 2 booster packs, just so you can flesh out your deck a little bit.
So this is the same in every box, but there's still that level of, if you get the starter pack, you still have some random cards in there that you can play around with and experiment with some other stuff that isn't just the base thing.
Do a little deck building. That's part of the fun with TCGs.
Yeah.
Fleshing out your deck.
You got this nice like foam insert that's all.
Yeah, it keeps everything protected. Make sure it's arrives safe and sound.
And the cards are kind of like the stock TCG size, so that sleeves and binders and all that stuff are gonna work. It's not like some unique size where people have to get special devices just for this one deck.
Yeah, exactly. So standard 2.5 inch by 3.5 inch trading cards have the rounded corners. And interestingly, that brings me to one of the first things that I wanted to talk about, because I know you spent a lot of time with the Vivid Kingdoms playing card set, thinking about paper stock. Just like playing cards, it's also important for trading cards. But there's some interesting differences. So one of the first things that we talk about when it comes to trading card paper stock is the difference between GSM and caliper. So that's an interesting distinction. So GSM is grams per square meter. It's a measure of the weight of the card itself. And the classic example that I like to use when talking about GSM is that a higher GSM does not always mean a thicker card. And the classic example is a nickel has the same GSM as 3 kitchen sponges stacked on top of one another, because it's about the weight and not the thickness. So the caliper correlates to the thickness of the card. So 2 separate things that you want to measure when you're thinking about designing your trading cards.
Caliper is one of those little tools that it's like how many microns thick is this thing or whatever, right?
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So the caliper is literally measuring thickness.
And then secondly, you always want to color core to your trading cards. So we do black core or blue core trading cards.
So does that mean you can see just like the core of the card, like there's something in the middle that's blue?
Yeah, exactly. So if you rip that card, it would be blue in the middle. So the color core is important because it's opaque. The color prevents light bleed. You want opacity when it comes to trading cards.
Yeah, so people can't literally like see through your card and use X-ray vision to see what you're gonna play next. Yeah.
Exactly, and they last a little bit longer and they're just a little more sturdy. Now, interestingly, one of the differences between trading card games and playing cards is that over here in the trading card world, we are much more likely to do full edge-to-edge color prints. Typically, playing cards are handled a lot more roughly and they're much more likely to chip. And full edge-to-edge color prints are way more common in trading card games. You see that all the time in things like Magic and Pokemon, especially for those rare foil chase cards that are really hard to get. When you get one, every single trading card player almost always sleeves it as well. That's never something you really see with playing cards, is you never really see people putting playing cards in sleeves, but that's very common in the trading card game industry.
Yeah, chipping was something people brought up during that era, and edge peeking, you know, like anything having to do with poker or gambling, like people take cheating like insanely seriously.
And trading card games can get pretty competitive as well. Definitely not something you want to mess around with when it comes to cheating, but it's just a lot less likely. And oftentimes you'll see players roll up to a match with all of their cards fully sleeved, and you actually play with them sleeved as well. So that's not uncommon at all.
Interesting. Okay, that's something I'm excited about. That's just like the tiniest bit more real estate to use for artwork.
Yeah, exactly. They're gonna look awesome. I'm so excited about the artwork I've seen so far. Another thing to consider when it comes to printing trading card games is offset versus digital printing. So historically, offset printing has been the gold standard, and typically that's what we use a lot of the time. But modern digital printing techniques have become amazingly sophisticated and are now very close and sometimes even surpassing the quality of traditional offset printing. I actually just was visiting a manufacturing facility today, and I was checking out their brand new Fujifilm J-Press machine, which is the largest printer I've ever seen in my life. It would probably be half the size of this warehouse behind us.
Crazy.
It was awesome.
So is that still CMYK? It's just using inkjet versus offset?
Correct. CMYK is an old school printing process. It works great and it's super effective, especially when you're printing like incredibly high volume mass market products, but it's old school, and modern digital printing techniques are amazingly sophisticated and they can create some awesome things. And you can do some really interesting things when it comes to custom collation and thinking about collation algorithms when it comes to printing each page or sheet of cards individually.
And collation is the randomization of the cards in the packs.
Yes, exactly. So that goes back to the randomization conversation that we were talking about.
That's probably what the trickiest part of your manufacturing process is like finding a way to randomize these packs.
Yeah, absolutely. And counterintuitively, you do not actually want your booster packs to be completely randomized, because if they were, it can lead to things where you might get an entire pack full of duplicate common cards. Super unlikely, but it's possible.
Right.
You might also get a full box and not get any Guardian cards at all. You might get all Denizens. And there's a bunch of kind of weird things that can happen.
There's the one guy who just gets like all ultra rares.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
he's like, yes!
Yes. It can just lead to a bunch of problems when you fully randomize. Even it's theoretically possible to do an entire print run without ever printing one specific card if it just gets missed in the pure randomization algorithm. So a fun story that I have about true randomness and a technological application of randomness, and a lot of people probably already know about this, but there's a company called Cloudflare, and they have this thing in their office in San Francisco called the wall of entropy. And what the wall of entropy is it's literally a wall of 100 different lava lamps on the wall, and they have cameras pointed at it. And they use that for the seeding of their algorithms, which encrypts web traffic. I'm sure I'm gonna get some of these details wrong, but
wild.
securing something like an HTTPS connection requires true randomness, or as close as you can approximate it. And with the fluid dynamics of the lava lamps, they translate that video feed of lava lamps bubbling up and down, and then use that as a seed input to this randomization algorithm. So that is true randomization, and that's not what we want.
Yeah, we don't want the lava lamp strategy.
Exactly. So there'll be no lava lamps involved in our process. So in contrast, when it comes to randomization, we use something called a collation algorithm. And what a collation algorithm is it takes a booster pack and it looks at each slot in the booster pack. So if it has 8 cards, it has 8 slots. And then you assign a certain card type to each slot. So you'll say the first slot will always be a common card. The second slot will always be a common or maybe a rare card. The third slot will always be a rare. The fourth will be a guaranteed ultra rare. And then maybe you can do like a guaranteed foil card in there or something like that as well. So that's how you establish the collation algorithm, which builds out the structure of the pack.
That's why when you see people do those opening videos, they take like certain cards and move them to the back because they like already know what those slots are or something.
On that note as well, typically us trading card manufacturers, you never want to put the best card right at the front or right at the back because it's the most likely to get damaged by scraping and rubbing against the packaging in transit.
Yeah.
So that's why they always hide the best card in the middle. It'll always be in that fourth to last slot so that you take the first 3 cards and put them at the front.
It's almost like the cards are a sleeve to protect the really cool ones.
Exactly. You sacrifice those, little common denizens at the front and back.
Yeah.
The other cool thing about doing kind of a bit more of a hands-on randomization process is that you can hand pick certain packs to be what we call in the industry God packs. So that's actually what you were referencing that might be possible with like a truly randomized thing. You do like 1 in 1,000 packs is all ultra rare hollow foil packs or something like that.
Have you done something like that before?
Yeah, and it's really cool, and it's such a cool feeling when you get it and you start to open it and you see that first card as a ultra rare hollow card, and then you know the rest of them are as well. Exactly.
That's cool.
I think we might have to sneak a couple of those in there.
Yeah, the God pack. Yeah, I like that.
So a little bit more background when it comes to hollow and foil prints. There's a bunch of different versions and ways that you can do holographic printing. I'm sure you're familiar with a bit of this already from your research into even just the talk box packaging, what you were doing. But there's a cold foil process, which is where you print the foil before the ink and it kind of shimmers through the ink.
Real quick, are you using the terms foil and hollow interchangeably, or are they two totally separate things?
Yeah, I use them interchangeably.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure we're speaking the same language. Noob to pro, you know what I mean? So
Awesome. So then we also have a hot stamp foil application process where the card is printed first. The foil is stamped on top of it, which is kind of typically used more for like eye-catching reflective logos, probably on the external sleeve of your Vivid Kingdoms playing card set.
Yeah, that gold.
That gold would have been a hot stamp process.
what's the cold one again?
Cold foil is where it's printed before the ink, and then the ink is printed on top, so the foil kind of shimmers through.
So do we have any holographic cards that we can, or foil or whatever?
There we go.
So this is cold foil, yeah?
Correct.
And it just shimmers. It looks cool. The foil just ever so slightly, it's almost like sunglasses for the card, right? Like it just dims it a tiny bit.
That's very important to keep in mind too when you're designing the cards. Foil does darken cards.
Yeah.
So as dark as it is on the screen itself, it will be that shade darker when
Yeah.
it's actually printed in a hollow form.
And CMYK printing, just when you look at it on a computer screen, it looks brighter than when it's physically printed. That's a big reason why I kind of want to do some local test prints as I go along, just to kind of get a vibe. Their printing machines are not going to be calibrated like the super crazy high-end ones that you guys are going to be using, but I just kind of want to potentially check out the differences between me staring at my iPad or my computer monitor versus like the physical thing to make color adjustments.
Yeah. I think that's a really good idea. And in general, we always encourage artists just to go as bright and punchy as possible when it comes to designing artwork for trading cards specifically.
The other thing, as far as the art goes, is that I'm doing all of the art starts in Adobe Fresco, and they only have like HSL sliders. They don't have RGB or CMYK.
Okay.
It's just like, these are the colors. And then once I get it out of Fresco and into Photoshop, I can convert it to CMYK and continue my color journey from there. But yeah, it's like I'm flying blind for the first portion of it.
That's always a process, the conversion.
Yeah.
A lot of artists we work with aren't familiar with working in CMYK. I know you obviously are, but lots of people are much more comfortable with RGB, and it's a transition to switch to the different color profile.
I just try to not use like super saturated teals very much, because those just basically, they get so grayed out in CMYK. Yeah. But one of the colors in CMYK is cyan, so I don't know why teals like suffer so much. It's like,
You'd think they'd have that one figured out.
bro, like cyan is almost teal. Anyway.
Yeah, so another interesting thing to consider, and this is the sheet layout of when you're actually printing the cards themselves. So thinking about which cards you want to arrange and in which ways on the sheets. We have done some uncut sheets in the past, and I think that would be cool to maybe look at as well, like a full sheet of Guardians or something like that could be really cool. And then interestingly, unlike playing cards, as far as I know, during the cutting process, occasionally you get a slightly miscut card, and those actually sometimes become more sought after by collectors. It's called a misprint or miscut, which can be kind of cool. Just a little bit of a unique one-of-one card that looks a little bit different.
I'm always trying to convince my customers of that when I when I send them messed up stuff.
Yeah, for the record, we try and avoid that as much as possible, and we really do have some QA processes to catch that. But
on some of the Artists in Wonderland prints, we had to sign like 5,000 prints, and I literally would like accidentally sign my signature twice on one of them, and I'm like, oh, that one's worth a lot more. Fair. Yeah, I feel that though. Yeah, so that you were talking about uncut sheets. Like, have you ever done a trading card game uncut sheet?
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't actually sold any of those previously, but if it's something people like, I know that was a big success with your Vivid Kingdoms project.
That's interesting. Yeah, those are such a unique style of art. I wasn't even familiar with an uncut sheet before I got into the playing card world. There's such a interesting kind of layout of. It's like one art piece that features like 56 individual art pieces or whatever.
Yeah, and I think seeing all the different biomes laid out, the different color schemes, it'll be really cool. So that's trading card game manufacturing and logistics 101, but that's really just half the puzzle. The second half, and really the fun part, is actually making the game and designing the game. So the first thing that you want to think about when it comes to designing the game is the win condition. So how do you actually win the game? And a lot of amateur TCG designers will jump first into card effects because those are really fun. You have a cool idea for how an effect on a card can change the game or really combo with other cards really well, but that can be a trap. You really want to start with how do you win the game and work backwards from there. And that's what we did. We started thinking about the idea of using the classic card game Cuddle for inspiration, trying to get to 21, using a traditional playing card deck, and then put our own spin on it. Really just, that's the only similarity to Cuddle, and we really kind of rolled with it from there.
Yeah, I've never even heard of that game before. But you started with, all right, you want to get to 10 points. And then you were like, how do we get to 10 points? That was the next step backwards, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, okay, maybe we have these cards that are worth a certain amount of points and you have to play them. But in order to play them, you have to have these guardians that protect them. Yeah. And then the pieces started falling into place from there.
Exactly. So after you have the win condition nailed down, the next step that you want to go to is the on your turn. So what are you actually doing on your turn to accomplish the win condition? And that's how we came into the idea of, okay, obviously you need to be playing a card, but how do we restrict your ability to play cards? So how do we add an interesting twist to control which cards you play and when? The classic example is things like Magic, which is controlled through mana, Pokemon cards, which are controlled through energy, things like that. We wanted to take the angle of, maybe we have a kind of guardian force protectors at the rim, and then your denizens, which are your actual win condition, which are less powerful, but that's what actually wins you the game.
Yeah, and it's already fun. I've played some of it. It's actually like pretty fun, but there's been some changes since even like the last time I played.
Yeah, so one of the other design first principles that we wanted to use when making this game is super simple. We want it to be really easy to learn how to play, and we call it the Mario principle. So super easy to learn, but incredibly difficult to master. You and I were talking about speedrunning a little bit earlier, and people spending their lives dedicating themselves to Super Mario 64 speedrunning, for example, and that's the kind of skill level curve that we're going for. Really basic onboarding, but really in-depth mechanics that you can sink your teeth into if you want to.
Yeah, in one of our earliest conversations, we were talking about how fast do we want these rounds to be, and I prefer games that are kind of more quick action, and hopefully the game is over before you want it to be over, so you play again. Whereas some stuff, it takes 90 minutes to read the instruction booklet, and it's just so dense that it's going to scare off most normies, and it takes like serious dedication to even get into the game. Like learning it fast, playing it fast, and then realizing like, oh dude, if I would have done this, I probably would have done better, and having some depth underneath there, but the simplicity makes it alluring to bring people in, and then the depth keeps people there.
Exactly, and the benchmark we're using for that is we want you to learn how to play this game in 2 turns or less. And then exactly like you said, at the end of the game, we're hoping that you feel like there's just 1 or 2 things you could have done differently, and then you might have won the game. And drawing that card at the right time or playing that card in a different way would have comboed this way, and you might have been able to make a comeback victory. So those are 2 really good signs that we're aiming for.
Yeah, learning how to play is super fast. My dumb artist brain was able to wrap my head around it like really fast. And then I'm just like, man, I wish I had every single one of these cards memorized so I would know their attributes like immediately when I played them, and there was just that desire to like keep learning the game more and more so that I would be able to develop better and better strategies. So I think we have achieved that goal already of having it be quick and fast and easy to learn, but having it be some depth there, and the game is just going to keep progressing.
And I think something else that'll be really cool is because we have short matches, I would imagine that if you're sitting down to play somebody, you might play best 2 out of 3 or best 3 out of 5. And as you start to play more rounds with the other person, you'll get to start to know their deck a little bit. And there might be this ability to do like almost a little bit of card counting where you can see what they've played, you know what's still in their deck, you know what's in their discard pile, you might be able to anticipate what they're going to play next, what strategy they're going to take. Maybe they have that aggressive desert biome deck, or they have more of the defensive ocean biome deck, and then you can counter that, or they might try and counter you. So there's this interesting like second order meta that emerges when you play multiple games against the same person.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think one of the other key things when it comes to TCG game design is kind of the balance between variance and skill, and the kind of push and pull between luck and strategy during the game. So there's that luck aspect of needing to pull the card at the right time, but then there's that strategy aspect of working with what you've got, seeing what your opponent is doing, and playing the cards you can in the best way possible. One other thing we're spending a lot of time thinking about when it comes to designing and writing the cards for this trading card game is keyword simplicity, and keyword compression is what we call it. So every single word on every single card needs to fight for its right to be on that card. And there's a goal that we have where we want to try and make every effect be 8 words or less. We don't always hit that a lot of the time, especially when we're trying to do more complicated conditional effects and things like that. But that's a really good benchmark to aim for, because you don't want to be reading a paragraph while you're trying to play the game. You don't want your opponent to have to be trying to read your paragraph card upside down if they aren't familiar with it. So keeping the words on the card as simple as possible goes a long way.
There was the inverse side of that coin when we were doing the play test. Like some of the language that was there temporarily, I was just like left asking like, wait, does that mean that it applies to all of these things? Or like there was questions being left. So like that economy of words versus making it abundantly clear like what this move actually does is a challenge in and of itself, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that process takes a lot of time. So typically what we do is we just kind of throw some words on the cards, roughly outlining the effect that we want to test, see if it even works, and then if that effect is going to make it into the end game, then we'll spend the time on keyword compression and wordsmithing our way to try and make it as efficient as possible. And then the card effect design is an interesting thing to talk about as well, and that goes back to the simplicity of the game. One of our other core design principles is a very simple core game with all of the complexity added through the card effects. So you set up this super simple framework of rules and strategies that's very simple to understand, but then you break all those rules and you add all this interesting dimension with the card effects themselves. The very simple example of that is the current gameplay on your turn loop is that you're only able to draw 1 card at the end of your turn. There's cards that allow you to draw multiple cards. You set up the rule and then you break it with the cards.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about trading card games is that like in theory, our instruction booklet could be be like the size of one of these cards.
Yeah.
But then each card introduces a new rule to that instruction booklet. So like as you play the game, the very, very, very simple game, each time you play a card, the game becomes more complex. And I think that's really cool because it's like you just have all these special moves and you don't know what kind of game you're about to play until you are playing it, because the situation is always evolving and your strategy needs to always be evolving.
And then thinking about the structure of the effects on the cards themselves, we try and think of it in two parts. So you have the condition and then the effect. And when that effect is triggered by the condition, we call that a proc. So that's kind of a trading card game world slang for you.
Say that again. So when the trading, what did you say?
When the effect on the card is triggered by the condition, we say that card is procced or procking. PROC, and that stands for programmed random occurrence. And basically whenever this card is triggered, you just say it's procced.
Oh, okay.
There might not even be a condition on it. It's just like whenever the effect happens, that card is procced.
All right. All right. I'll keep that term in my head.
Let me just confirm. Yeah, programmed random occurrence, or PROC. And that originated from early game development and MMOs when there's things like a critical hit or a bonus ability that's triggered. So we use that phrase in the trading card game world as well. Cool. So another interesting thing that we're exploring right now, and we've talked a little bit about this, is scaling card rarities through their effects. So the classic example, or the easiest example, would be a common card that is a condition to the effect. So you might have a common card that is, if your opponent plays a Guardian, you get to draw one extra card. Then the rare version of that card is just guaranteed draw one card. And then the ultra rare version of that card would be draw two cards. So it's a little bonus.
Yeah.
So the basic, most common version is like a conditional. The rare is a guaranteed effect. And then the ultra rare is a bonus effect.
As the cards get more rare, their power scales up.
Exactly. And then if that's too strong, we can nerf that by saying maybe the opponent needs to play a specific biome's Guardian. So if the opponent plays a desert Guardian, draw one card, then the rare would be if they play any Guardian, you get a draw card, and then the ultra rare is draw one card guaranteed.
Right.
Through playtesting, we can test if maybe drawing two cards is overpowered, and we can nerf it by adjusting the conditions.
Yeah, the playtesting is so clutch because each game is so different. So yeah, that's super cool. And it makes the rarity of the card not just valuable for the total like collector enthusiast, but also for someone who wants to play the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And then really the next step of playtesting and balance testing is the deck building design constraints. So right now when we play games, we're playing with big decks because we want to playtest all the cards and see how they all work. But eventually, once we get the cards to a more polished state, we're going to start playing around with deck building constraints. So maybe you can only have 3 ultra rare cards in your deck. Maybe you can only have 1 or 2 watchers, and then 5 or 6 uncommons, and then the rest have to be commons. So you have to strategically pick which ultra rare cards you want depending on the deck strategy that you're going for.
Just like when I'm making art, when I introduce restrictions, it just makes things more fun. So.
And also makes it so that if your buddy has all the ultra rares in the whole deck, he can't just come in and crush you.
Yeah. I think I would be the buddy in that scenario. I made the freaking cards. Like I get to have the ultra rares.
One of the other things that we're doing with the current game design is almost all of the cards are an on reveal effect. So the effect happens when the card's flipped over and then it doesn't happen again. The exception to that is the Watcher cards. So this is a card that you can play and it has an ongoing permanent effect as long as it's in play on your team. And they're themed around the strategy of each biome. So the Desert Watcher is more offensive and the Ocean biome is more defensive, and so simple things like that.
Yeah, so when you get that Watcher card out there, its power keeps going turn after turn. The one thing I noticed in our playtesting is like sometimes I'll be like, I don't want to waste a turn playing a Watcher because like I just want to keep like getting more Guardians out there so I can play more Denizens, so I can get more points, so I can win the game. So it's almost like trying to find that strategic time to actually play a Watcher, which doesn't give you any points, but it does give you these cool effects, is like a strategic decision in and of itself. Something we haven't talked about yet, at least right now in the game design, is that cards are played simultaneously with your opponent.
Yeah.
So you put your card out there face down, and it's like, you ready? You ready? Yeah, I'm ready. And then you flip it, and it's like this head-to-head reveal. So you have to do a lot of prediction of what you think your opponent might do, and that's a really cool aspect of it. And a lot of the cards say like, if your opponent plays a denizen this round, then XYZ happens, and you're like, God, I hope they play a denizen this round. And then you flip and they like play a guardian, and you're like, oh, my card does nothing right now. So that's a really interesting aspect of it, because there's strategy, there's luck, but you have to kind of get inside the head of your opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. It also speeds up the game a lot, which is great. Like it really leads to this snappy gameplay round where every turn you're both playing a card, and then you really try and get into the head of your opponent and see what they're going to do. And the sky biome is also kind of themed around that idea. It's like our predictive knowledge deck. We're kind of thinking about the eyes in the sky. You have a better ability to predict what your opponent is going to do and are rewarded for correctly predicting them.
Yeah, like I think some of the sky cards, like the opponent has to play their card, like show their card face up.
Yeah, exactly.
And even though you play at the same time, like you totally know what their card is or whatever.
Yeah, so you make the rule and then you break it with the card.
Yeah. That's a cool aspect of the game, I think, so far.
One of the other things that we're trying to really focus on and think about is forward compatibility when it comes to designing this card game. The best card games are not necessarily a one and done, but they evolve over time, and you can add new cards and add new biomes and add new strategies and mechanics. Leaving enough room in the core game design mechanics for that expansion pack in the future potentially is a really great thing to be thinking about right from day one. So we spend a lot of time thinking about forward compatibility of card designs as well.
Yeah, there's extra biomes that I want to do. It was kind of hard to narrow it down to 4. I think the swamp would be such a unique vibe compared to what we have so far. And because I'm trying to like be inspired by animals that live in these specific biomes, there's just like I'm not going to be able to do a bear card because like bears don't really live in the, I mean, there's like sun bears and stuff in the jungle, but like I'm not going to be able to do a grizzly bear. They don't live in the jungle or the ocean or the sky or the desert, you know? So I'm just like, ooh, there's some future room for expansion and improvement there.
Yeah, I love that. And thinking about the direction you can take that from an art design perspective is really cool. Yeah, and one of the most fun things for us as game designers has been getting inspired by the artwork that you're producing and using that in the effect design as well. So sometimes we'll have an effect that we've already made that just matches perfectly with an illustration. And sometimes you'll send us an artwork draft and we'll be like, oh, we have the perfect effect idea for this. An example of that is your Arid Jack card in the desert. Obviously the desert's an offensive attack themed deck, but we saw that slingshot and we thought about the idea of kind of doing like a sniper card. So it can take out like one high value card on the opponent team, but only a high value card. So it's not overpowered, it has to be strategically targeted, but this low powered Arid Jack can like take out one of the best cards in the opponent if you play it at the right time. And that was something that was inspired.
Yeah, and you've even been sending me, you're like, hey, we have this move planned for the sky biome. Maybe you should start thinking about like a peacock style animal or something that's big, a big showy flashy bird, and it's going like back and forth. You're making moves based on my art. I'm potentially making art based on some moves that you guys are coming up with. So it's very symbiotic relationship. I like it.
Some common TCG phrases to get you indoctrinated into the lifestyle of trading card games. You have your rarity slot. So we talked about that in the booster pack. You have your 1 through 8 slot. And pack openers will often know which slot to be looking out for. So the rarity slot is something that you hear people talk about. If you talk about people pulling cards, that's a slang way for saying opening packs. So pull the good card. It's a common word people use.
The rarity slot, is that uniform across most TCGs, or does each one kind of like switch up there where that rare card is going to live?
It is mostly uniform. It's just somewhere in the middle. It depends also on how many cards are in the pack. Most TCGs don't have a consistent number of cards, so there's a little bit of flexibility there. Yeah, but it's always not at the front or the back.
Right.
Then you have your chase card. So that's going to be our ultra rare, maybe those sketch cards that I know you've been showing. Super cool.
So you could pull a chase card and that'd be a really good thing.
Exactly. Yeah, chasing down that card. A breaker, somebody who opens a lot of boxes.
Okay.
So if you're opening a ton of booster boxes, you might be called a breaker.
Yeah, when you did that little move with the thumbnail.
Yeah, exactly.
Breaking hard. You're breaking like the Australian Olympian right now.
Oh no. The meta, very common thing, short for the meta game. Just generally as people start to play the game a lot, there'll be a meta that develops of like
certain cards are considered the best, or
sleeving. So we talked about that a little bit. You always want to put your cards in sleeves if you can. Penny sleeves are really great for protecting your cards, especially those chase cards.
What are penny sleeves?
Penny sleeves are just protective sleeves, so just really thin plastic sleeves.
Do they cost a penny? Probably
Typically,
not.
yeah.
Really?
Yeah, they're really cheap.
You can get 100 of them for $1?
A couple bucks.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you buy them in bulk, then probably even less than that.
Wow.
In terms of the protection tiers when it comes to trading card games. You have your penny sleeves, then you have top loaders, which are a semi-rigid plastic, and then you have a mag case holder. So that's a rigid plastic magnetically snapping shut case.
And that holds like a bunch of cards, right? Or no?
They all typically hold one.
Wow.
Sometimes you'll actually see people put a card in a sleeve and then in a top loader if you want it to be really protected, or sometimes they even double sleeve it.
Yeah.
Okay, so sometimes you talk about a top deck. So if you draw the perfect card off the top of your deck, you might use that as a verb. So he top decked the exact card that he needed during that play. A little phrase for you can use in your play testing.
That's a good one.
Yep. Bouncing a card as well. So if you return a card back to a player's hand, then you might say that it's a bounced card, and basically often used as like a control or a delay tactic.
Okay.
So there we go. There's your little introduction.
I
into
literally
the
like
TCG
didn't know any of
terms.
these, so.
Okay, awesome.
I mean, I sleeve. I think I know sleeve, but I didn't know penny sleeve. So.
There we go.
All right, I'm gonna put those on flashcards and just
We'll
study
test
them
you.
off camera. Yeah.
We'll test you in the next playtest.
Fantastic. That's
Is that enough?
That's so much good information.
Okay.
Just after that, I feel like I have a better understanding going forward of all of the nitty gritty and the logistical details of TCGs. And there's still a whole world to learn, but I learn best when I dive in.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna keep pushing.
Editing me from the future. Just wanted to give a big thank you to 1000 for hosting me at his warehouse, which was unbelievably cool, by the way, and for partnering with us on this project, and for also helping to make this video possible. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and let me know in the comments what types of videos you'd like to see from me next. I'm new to YouTube, but I'm excited to start making content here and I'd love your help. Also consider joining the Discord. Link will be on the screen. Link is in the description. We do giveaways there. We talk about all things games and game design, and you'll also have early access for playtesting. Thanks again and talk to you soon.